Welcome to a new episode of the U&AI podcast, where we speak with executives and artificial intelligence experts about their real-life AI use cases and their outlook on our working world in the AI era. Today's guest has AI even in his executive title, as he is the Global Chief Product and Applied AI Officer at Capgemini Invent, in one of the world's largest consulting firms, basically. So most of you probably know Christoph Bornschein as the founder of TLGG, one of Germany's first digital transformation consultancies, which became kind of a household name and at one point joined forces with Omnicom. But Christoph is also very high in demand for board seats and supervisory positions. He has been working with large enterprises like Deutsche Bank, ZF, Lufthansa, and ING. But he's also a very active advisor and investor in tech startups. So that's a lengthy introduction. Welcome, Christoph. Did I forget anything important?
No, I think that's well put, and thanks for inviting me. Pleasure being here, even though, other than planned, we're not sitting together in a studio in Munich right now, which I would have preferred, to be quite frank.
It's always so much better, but
Yeah, I agree.
maybe and hopefully next time. Yes.
Yeah, let's see how I go through that and whether this earns me a next time.
I have
Let's
no
try it with
doubts.
the first time.
I didn't mention your various podcast
That's
engagements
all
and your
right.
very own podcast. So in this conversation, clearly you are the expert and the pro with regards to podcasting. Okay, so let's start with a question that we ask all of our guests on U&AI.
Yeah.
And I know in your position, there probably isn't the typical workday that you could lead us through, but still, maybe you can share some insights how you interact with AI in your everyday work life. How has it
Yeah.
changed your ways of working if you look back just 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah, so obviously, AI is a vivid part of my everyday life on the kind of meeting side, meeting AI people and AI platforms and tools and stuff like that, and on my kind of setup side. And the kind of most eminent tool and use case I have is using TwinMind in whatever meeting I'm in, including your podcast right now. So transcribing and saving everything into my context and brain to later then make it searchable and work on top of that really is the one thing that is totally eminent, which leads to interesting situations. I build a skill that is meeting to PPT. So I can just basically create a PPT out of any meeting in minutes, which from the angle of some people that then receive PPTs or whatever is really doing magic. So it's really converting conversations into PowerPoint still seems to be magic these days, which it isn't, quite obviously. So there's a lot of Claude around me. There's a lot of TwinMind around me. I play around with N8N. So it's really like AI is there every single day on the business side anyway, as I'm working in AI topics, and in the personal use side, it's just it's there because I do everything with it.
And I think people can hear from what you're sharing here that you're, I think, really like proactive, not just using some of the tools that are available in your organization, but really building and being on the edge of what's possible. I think one
And
of our
that's really
previous
that's to your second point of the question.
yeah
That's the interesting one. So the kind of upgrading the setup thing, the sitting down almost every weekend, rethinking whether I'm still on the edge of what's possible is something that's fairly new. So the speed of evolution really makes it mandatory for me, at least, to do kind of a catch-up game in my personal getting things done setup, like
yeah
basically on a weekly basis. So it's really not even close to where it started anymore. And I think I'll change some things on the setup that I'm sitting on right now, even this weekend.
yeah. Well, I mean, um, same here. Last week I was building a Claude skill or iterating on a Claude skill for basically our go-to-market activities. And
Yeah.
it's crazy, like if you don't do this on a regular basis, as you said, right? You really feel like, okay, so much has been gotten possible now since last time I checked. It can be quite overwhelming. Are there any areas of responsibilities, situations, tasks where you as Christoph Bornschein have been important in your organization or your organizations last year or 2 years ago, where you just don't do this anymore per se?
I literally have stopped building documents from the scratch. So this is really like the fear of the empty paper is gone,
Mm.
because I never start with an empty sheet in Word, Excel, or what have you. That whole notion of I start building something and open up, I don't know, PowerPoint. That's just not happening anymore. It's always a draft that you start working on, something that you prompted and took out of the context first. So it's never a white paper in front of me that is the starting point. And you still recall those days. Start a new file in whatever, and it's just gonna be empty. That's not happening.
Yeah, yeah. Also, something we spoke about previously. I think you said that with AI, the whole C-suite back to work theme becomes a
Yeah,
real thing, and I think
that's true.
many ways that you describe what you are doing show how you're living this. But what does that mean for the average leader, manager, executive out there? How well do you see people coping with that change and the pace of it?
Yeah, that's the hard question of today. So what I see is a fairly vast adoption of at least Claude, and I think Claude and Anthropic and the visibility that Anthropic gained and Opus 4.6 really made a difference. So I see Claude charts everywhere right now.
Yeah,
But there is quite a void, and I would still call that the digital divide. There still
yeah,
is leaders that don't use it, and they start to feel slow. So the one big question really is with the AI acceleration that happens on the top, faster decisions, faster iterations on decks, faster iterations on skills, and what have you. The core question that remains unanswered for me is how do you integrate that into an organization that overall is slower than that? So, as said, basically from our conversation, I could now do a PowerPoint, and you could have it in like 5 minutes. But why would you want to have that? How would you work with that? And is are we coming to a point where direct to context, which I coin as my word,
mhm,
is the kind of interaction that we're going to see? So don't talk to me, just send me a file that I can integrate into my context. That's fully sufficient. And I think that whole question of the AI to AI, A to A is the name I think right now, interface. How does hybrid interaction with me and my context work? How do other people structure that? That's really the unanswered question. And as of now, it's really hard to tell whether you're totally over accelerating when people are not working with an AI enabled tool. So it's not that easy, but I see that the leaders that start to do that really make use of the AI advantage, and the others kind of fall behind way quicker than ever before. And we're talking about something where the kind of front runner users of that they started 2 weeks ago, and it already feels like they're on steroids.
yeah, yeah. So
So my head start in let's just say workplace setup. I'm not doing magic. This is available technology that I maybe started using a month earlier than other people.
yeah, yeah, I agree. And as you said, the dealing with the technology and building with the technologies that are available now, that's probably not the bottleneck. And
No,
I mean, both of us have been around during the earlier waves of digital transformation, right? And I do
yeah,
see some parallels. It's probably also dangerous to compare because it seems much faster, much more radical.
it
But
is much
in
faster. I can still recall when kind of the first steam engine was invented, the internet, um, and that came in steps, and we're talking baby steps. So
yeah,
from the modem that made those funny noises to cool internet things that wasn't weeks, it was years basically. And in this case, really like if you would stop using Claude now, wait 4 weeks, and then restart Claude, you'll see a totally different program, totally different capabilities and stuff like that. So keeping track is so much more important on an almost daily basis, to not get lost by that. And that hasn't been the case when the internet came. It
Yeah,
was fairly slow.
yeah, yeah. So it's hard to make predictions, but I think the parallels I see is that the limitations also in these big organizations is a lot of companies feel like they're even overspending on AI, but the limitations, the
Which
bottlenecks
is
are not in the
because they are.
technology. What do you say?
I think the reason for feeling that they're overspending is they are. I
Yeah,
think what we see is massive discussions around FinOps, alternating LLMs being used. So you can't just put every single task in the most expensive model, Opus 4.6, and then
yeah,
expect
exactly.
it to be cheap. So
That's something
it's
where
early days.
we work on a lot. The whole governance level for that, for the agent economy is missing, right? Like how, as you said, like it's not salaries anymore, but maybe insurance costs, and
Yeah,
there's like a lot of things to be optimized. But I think the biggest issue is that the way AI is being applied, it's just to the organizations how they are, and
yeah.
buying 20,000 Microsoft Copilot licenses doesn't really change a lot.
Not
And then you
not
have
not at
those
all. That might
sobering
change with
effects.
the E7 update of Office 365. That brings Anthropic to Copilot. I think they'll not call it Copilot even.
Yeah,
But the point you're making is a fairly interesting one, and I didn't come up with a word. When I arrived at Capgemini, there was quite some interesting research coming from France on a topic that I like, and way to paraphrase that, called human AI chemistry. And I always found that interesting and leading to so early on understand that the value being created is really down to that question: how is the human AI chemistry structured? How do you evolve that, and how do humans and AI work alongside?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd like to get to how will this change your industry, change professional service in the moment as well. But maybe
Yeah,
we can get back to a moment where you said like direct to context is a term you
yeah.
want to coin, and so
Saying
many
that again,
meetings
it's my term.
is your term.
I came up with it.
Um, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about this, right? Because what we see, the lowest level of AI adoption is okay. People actually now see value in call transcripts and then use it for summaries. But I think that's so much like just scratching on the surface. And most companies we work with, and which is mostly European corporates, like the idea that the whole model, the whole architecture, how information flows in organizations could be changed, and probably in order to leverage AI should be changed. I think we're not there yet.
No.
So maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on direct to context, and where will this lead us?
Yeah.
In how many
So
meetings will Christoph Bornschein still be in a year from now?
not many, I think. And again, that's a very corporate statement. You spend hours and hours in meetings that are mainly reportings, discussion about things where you play a minor role, and you shouldn't be part of that anyway. But so in kind of general hygiene terms, it's a waste of time. And everyone knows to a certain degree, but nonetheless, at times there's information shared that you need to know and stuff like that. And I don't need to be around in those meetings. So for me, it would be fully sufficient to just have TwinMind join the meeting. And I don't even need a summary for that. So because reading that needs time again, I need the data that is transported to be integrated in my context. So the information architecture that I then use to have an LLM do tasks on top of that, to compute on top of the information, and that's fairly interesting because there's an interface problem. Quite obviously, everything that's not in the context is not going to be part of the result of stuff that I work on. And there's such a lot of things that you forget. The LLM and the context model never forgets. So TwinMind, for example, I often ask my memory, which is in TwinMind. What did we know about X, Y, Z? Because I simply forget it. The model never does. So I kind of recall stuff out of the context and out of the memory way better than out of mine. And then on top of that, computing that, I can compute my mind. And most of the cases, you don't really know which is the most important information or where does information fit. The model sorts information way better than I do. And direct to context for me means send me information that I don't need to read, but it has to be present for the LLM to compute on top of that.
Yeah, yeah. It makes tons of sense.
So
And I think,
informal information or, I don't know, serendipitous pieces that then are fed into whatever I work on.
yeah, yeah. So to me, that makes sense. Still being aware of the kind of companies also Capgemini works with, I am aware of the big gaps that are between those realities. So maybe this is your short slot to also share a little bit about what Capgemini and Capgemini Invent do to help companies in that transformation. Because what you do right now is a lot like, and in a previous conversation, you even mentioned you just recently set up your own local context server, and like it's a lot of individual bottom up C-suite
Yeah.
back to work building, but it's so much more difficult and complex to change this whole IT landscape. Isn't even feel
Yeah.
doesn't really feel like the right term anymore. But
And it gets easier, to be quite frank. So what you see is, and the word commonly used to that is collapsing enterprise stack. So
yeah,
what you actually see is that agentic AI transformation, which seems to be the word these days,
yeah,
is even helping overcoming legacy IT systems. So the acceleration of usage is actually happening. So just very broadly, since my job is product and applied AI, what I'm doing on the kind of basic level of my work is converting our offering from a time and material, so we're going to send you consultants and you pay by the hour, into models that sit more with IP-based consulting, is the word IBM claimed back in the day. So really productizing our work. And I think the other new modern thing is service as a software. And then really sell licenses of software and products alongside consulting or as a standalone. So in certain areas of, I don't know, process optimization of a factory, there is ready-made IP that you can apply to projects that will accelerate how quickly you can go in. You'll make software work instead of junior consultants. And there's such a lot of things that at some point a software will do that back in the days a human being did. And I'm basically building the IP inventory, finding the IP, productizing project results, doing insourcing of IP that we're seeing, and developing greenfield stuff. So the cool stuff that I'm right now working on, and that's really exciting, is AI cybersecurity. And the question how you protect yourself against attack agents, how you build trusted agents networks and stuff like that. So really future-looking stuff that is tightly connected to cybersecurity. The attacker is not going to be human either. It is going to be an AI attacking you. And as we now learned with Mythos and Anthropic, the AI does that way better than any other human attacker. So the question is how you defend against attacks from the AI with AI. That's my kind of 2 days work.
nice, yeah, and nice on the one hand to work on those kind of challenges over time, but also quite scary if you get
But you
into it.
meet
To be honest,
crazy researchers. I love
yeah,
it. So,
yeah,
so, so it's really like this is university research starting to get productized, and that is not something that a consultant will work on. So you will not see, and you will in governance questions and stuff like that. But PowerPoint is not the answer here. It is code. So
yeah,
what I'm doing is basically converting our organization into consultants that code or coders that consult. So changing the end result of what we deliver from PowerPoint to code.
yeah. So I was sure we get a little bit more technical in this conversation, but I really like it, at least compared to some of the other executive conversations we had on this podcast. So the way we look at this new agentic enterprise stack
Hmm.
is basically like these three main layers of the context layer, where it's really about like how does the governance for all the data you have look like.
Do we want to geek out on Obsidian? No, we don't want to do that,
Probably there we probably have to stop, also because of the time limit we have today.
right?
But that, right, where traditional, maybe also software as a service companies were like the system of records, but on top of that, where all the sense making intelligence also is being brought in, how the data comes together, how is it managed, how is it kept fresh, how is it made available. Then you have, I think we still need workflows. I think
I
they
agree.
will be very different to today's. We talked about it a little bit, right? Forget about a lot of the meetings you are having today. Don't just digitize and bring AI in the workflows you have
Yeah.
today. And then on top of that, you have agents that run through workflows, sometimes create their own workflows, etc. So in your work and how professional service or then
In basic
service.
terms, I agree. By the way, just
Okay, that's good.
to say that.
I expect you to interrupt if you don't agree. um, in your vision of service as a software and like the future of professional services, are you operating on all of those three levels,
Yeah.
or is it more like right now there's good consulting budget to be captured on like helping to set up the context layer, but at one point it's gonna be mostly like agents dropping into context layers, maybe sometimes updating workflows.
But you could even think about, so if you stay on the agent layer, a blueprint of agents is something that you'll be doing, which is IP. So rendering agents into very proprietary verticalized use cases. But back to your question, the answer is yes. So Capgemini as an organization, and that is true for the whole group, not just a Capgemini Invent, plays on all play fields. So we're a large SAP partner, obviously. We're partner with all and every hyperscaler of this planet. So cloud is
Yeah.
a big thing that we're doing. My work in specific is closer to user and business case. I see CIOs a lot, but there's like more capable colleagues in the S4 transformation. I'm really not an S4 transformation person. I'm more looking for where is the value, how can you build time to value that is quicker than ever before, and that sits on the content layer and on the agentic orchestration LLM. My assumption most of the times, and the reality is it's better than I expected, the accessibility and availability of data most of the times is a given. So you start working on top of the data and not go down, at least I don't, into the system of record because I'm just not an expert in SAP. I
Got it.
just assume that the system of record has the data that I want to work on, and then it's really down to business decision makers wanting business technology to create value for them. That's more the kind of layer of value creation that I focus on.
Yeah. That's a good place to be in, right? We we see both. On the one hand, those that have been driving their own
And we do both
cloud.
as well, but I would always pull colleagues in if someone
You have your other
says
experts there.
S4 core
Yeah.
transformation. That's really not something where I feel that my very limited knowledge needs to be spread.
No, I get it. It's just it reminds me of what you said earlier, of this widening gap. I feel like those companies who've been more progressive and in the earlier stage of digital transformation, cloud transformation, making data available, they are now at least in a better position. Not all of them are investing and progressing the way they could, but if you've been falling back during that time already,
Yeah.
or that technological evolution, then it's so much harder. And there is still a surprising number of corporates, in my perspective, that are still doing the groundwork of making data accessible,
But
making
the
like,
opposite is
yeah,
is true as well. I came across a very large, I can't say the name, a DAX 40 company that invested massively into data strategies, data availability, and all things alike. And this project was basically perceived to be a failure. So it was a overspend for not a lot of impact. Now that AI is coming and computing that, it proves that they're actually in the best position possible to activate on that. So from a this is a waste of money, we failed, we did what the data scientist said to us, and then nothing happened, to we can now expose everything in a fairly structured way into an LLM, and that really moves the needle. It flipped into, wow, this is a great data fundament.
That's why we did it for. Yeah, it makes sense. Um, let's look a little bit more into the future. And again, I mean, we all know how difficult predictions are, particularly about timelines, right? But you
Yeah.
mentioned Anthropic earlier, and I think
Everyone needs to mention Anthropic these days. I
exactly,
think it's just
exactly.
inevitable.
And I admire the also the positioning and the marketing
Yeah,
work they do, right? Because
yeah.
from my perspective, at least they seem in how they work, but also how they communicate is to be on the more considerate and ethical side. We don't know
Yeah.
anything about what's going inside there, but it's impressive, yeah. But what I wanted to get to is their like labor report, and I mean you see all of these functions and job groups basically, how much potential there would be for automation and how far they are. Um, like, how do you think of this? Do you feel like right now this is being exaggerated, or in the companies you work with it's rather still underestimated? What's your sense there, if
This
there
is
is
true.
any?
It's over exaggerated on the long term, underestimated on the short term, underestimated on the long term. So it's really so. I was sitting down. I think it's 2 weeks ago with our minister for digital, and he made that point. And I think is very true. The change is going to be massive, and we can already see that, we can feel that, and we need to react. Yet we're not reacting. So it is going to touch all and everything. So education is going to be touched. The way we think about professions and skills and stuff like that. The reality is, no one knows when the tipping point is going to happen. It's going to be quicker than we expect, I guess. But the change and shift that we're seeing is massive. And I don't know if you read my last article in the Manager magazine, where I spent a bit of time thinking about the concept of why are we still taxing labor, where we should tax production, so the algorithm, in a world where less and less labor is going to create value. And that's what we're seeing basically as a basic principle. The idea of taxing labor is just not fit for purpose anymore. We should come up with the old Marx concept of the
Yeah,
machine tax, and ask ourselves the question, do we need to tax data and algorithms because work is not the value creating factor anymore?
yeah,
And that's kind of the big questions that will be imminent and that we should start to discuss now, which we aren't. And that is a massive underestimation of the change that is going to happen. And that's really what worries me. So I think the kind of corporate conversation on how do we cover value, how do we automize, how do we do cost out programs and stuff like that, that's fairly advanced because everyone is under the pressure of the markets to do their stuff. I think we're not spending enough time for the societal consequences and for the question, how does that change the operating system of our country, of the EU, and of the world as a whole? And that really is worrying.
yeah, yeah. And it's nothing. I think the kind of, I do believe the sentiment is true that we need AI to sort of like counterbalance the effects of demographic change. So there's a lot to
I
that.
agree.
Yeah. But at the same time, I mean, this whole idea that like
But
the
let me
pace.
make one point here. We need to reskill, and everyone's aware we need to reskill our workforce because teachers, nurses, doctors, and all of that, we're having a massive shortage in there. But we should have started to do that years ago. So the reality is now the boomers are retiring, and we know that we've got too many people on one hand side and labor shortage on the other hand side. This is not going to change from so people that will not work in the back office of a bank of an insurance anymore because AI is now doing that will not be capable doing nurse jobs next week.
Yeah. And I do think that this is nothing you can leave to just the businesses. I think
Yeah.
companies, even very big ones, like that's it takes a level of coordination and maybe also strategy on a, as you mentioned it, a
And a
societal
societal
level.
discourse, quite frankly.
Yeah,
So the one thing that we should be doing is really have a agreement process. So basically agenda setting around where do we intentionally want to go with AI. And the reality that I'm observing, and that's not only true for Germany, it's true for a lot of countries, is we're just letting it happen and then ex post try to find fixes for the results. And my wish would really be a more proactive, intentional way of we now know what the AI can do for us. How do we want to make use of that in the most human and best societal way possible? And we're not discussing that, at least not outside this podcast.
True, true. And even within that podcast, I was about to say, like, I could talk about this for hours, and I always have to promise my team not to get too political because I'm very excited about it. And at the same time, yeah, it's opening whole new and much bigger chapters.
Which is
Um,
why I'm doing a project on the side right now. And I can't say too much about that because it's still ongoing. We are massively focusing on research institutes, universities, and partnerships in that area because I believe that we need to get involved into policymaking. We need to get involved into the societal discourse that we're seeing, and you can't really do that inside a large scale corporate that we are. So we're really looking into, and that for everyone that hears that podcast, call me. We're looking into platforms where we can go deeper and be more fundamental around the change, and not just let it happen.
100%. That's something I've been talking about a lot, not just within my company recently. Is like I think we're at a point where we also have to think about what does it mean to be a citizen and how can we
Yeah,
engage beyond our everyday role, right? I think it's not enough to pay taxes, given the kind of challenges and changes we're facing right now. So if you're capable, if you have time, if you're a brain to think about, I think this is required from us right now. Yeah.
it is. Yeah, I agree.
So
So,
still
so,
one
so now
thing.
you need to stop yourself on the political side because you're
Exactly,
going to get
exactly, exactly.
internal criticism.
Today I'm alone at the studio, so nobody can stop me, but I'll do that for now. So let's come to sort of like the last part here. And to be fair, one way of also driving progress is within our smaller everyday sphere of influence, to be good role models and
Yeah,
show what can be done and where things might be heading and be part of that kind of change. So we always ask people joining us on You and AI about their dream agent, and a lot of the things you've been building seem like you're pretty close to the possible future at any point in time, but
yeah, I
maybe
am.
you still have some ideas of like some things you are not allowed to do yet, or AI cannot do yet. Like, do you still have ideas of a dream agent that helps you in ways that it's not possible today?
Yeah, and the problem is that I know why it isn't around, and what to do in order to be it around. So it's really what I want to have is a bit more kind of prediction and anticipation within the agentic framework. And my assistant is not going to like what I'm saying right now. My schedule is basically a data point. Predictive flight booking and flight scheduling and stuff like that. That would be very interesting. It's possible. It's just like I'm having a data silo that I need to crack. So that whole make me an offer, suggest me whatever that flight because it just fits perfectly. That's the one kind of next acceleration and development that we'll see definitely. But that's really what I'm waiting for. That whole notion of don't wait for me to ask something, offer something.
Yeah, I mean, I can't help but that picture of like us really just being the human interface to to this massive brain in the back, being guided and
It's
saying what
definitely
we're
where we're
being told.
going.
It's coming closer, right?
Yeah. And that's interesting because the question really is going to be how do we train our brains in a world where so much complexity is taken away from us? Yeah, but again, predictive behavior, that's the interesting part.
Yeah, agree. So I'd like to, in that context of the dream agent, I'd like to ask you a question about like one part of your work, because that's something well, I've been experimenting with, and we're working on in our lab basically, and that's the idea of AI supervisory board members. So,
Hmm.
are you on any boards where this is already sort of like going that direction? How do you think about this?
I think so for legal reasons not possible if you're on a formal public board. But the one thing that we're already working on is agentified decision-making processes that come from so longer story. We're working a lot around law as code. Codification of law to actually have AI execute law in
Yeah.
mass scale administrative processes, so subsidy decision making processes and stuff like that. That can be applied to corporates as well. So really codifying the code of conduct, codifying the rules of engagement and stuff like that, and automizing compliance processes that demand for, I don't know, confirmation or permissions and stuff like that. I think we'll see that first. So agentically pre-prepared board meetings and the agentified board meeting before we see an agent being a board member.
Yeah.
But in
I mean, not
cases
in
like,
a probably not in a legal sense of like real accountability, right? I think that's probably way further away. But I mean, that's something that we already facilitate with Workpath, the preparation, the facilitation, the afterwards. But really, what we see, and that was something where I was surprised. There is a lot of even German corporates that sort of like building these digital clones of board members, and they have like basically simulations of board meetings before the board meeting where
yeah.
the arguments are already exchanged, and like I think that can bring a lot of quality. So I was curious what you see.
No, and actually, we are seeing, let's just take an example that is easier to grasp. So take the chief risk officer of Deutsche Bank.
Yeah,
It is a mandatory job. Risk is a topic that needs to be paid attention to, and the way the chief risk officer of Deutsche Bank and any other bank reports into the board is human to human interface. So basically, presentation, reading out numbers and stuff like that. The risk report of a bank is crazy material. So you really reading that, understanding that, grasping that, and controlling, if you are a board member, the chief risk officer, that's hours and hours of work. Checking this integrity through an agent way easier than it is done before because it is numbers, it's rule based. No one needs to read through that with a fine liner and find the mistakes. A computer slash agent slash AI can do that way better than any human being now, and we should apply that. That obviously.
yeah. No human should be doing that or have to be doing that anymore. That's true.
The Deutsche Bank is a great example. They sent me their annual closing of, I don't know, 2018, long ago. We're talking about thousands of pages of paper that you can't digest in an afternoon. It's just not possible. And that there is a risk in that because the risk is not really controlled or controlled by people that get tired, that can't read 1,000 pages and digest them and stuff. So the computers can do that better and should do that, even in a boardroom.
Yeah. Makes me think of a former Volkswagen CEO who's been said that he's like taking a couple of suitcases of paper into their weekends.
Yeah,
So that's probably also going to be helpful in these kind of situations. All right, Christoph, thank you so much for your time. We've been
felt
talking
like a
about this.
quickie.
It's things are moving really quickly, so I hope we can do this another time, maybe then in person again. But for today, I think
Fingers crossed.
gave some exactly. We'll trust that the airlines and everything will work back then. Yeah, for today,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. Thanks for all the insights. Really interesting.
It has been a pleasure being with you, even remotely.
Thanks. This was another episode of You and AI. Thank you for listening in. If you would like to hear more stories like this, I recommend you to subscribe to this podcast and to visit workpath.com/AI. If you are driving the AI transformation in your company, or if you are a leader who is interested in these dream agents that we discuss here, we'd be happy to talk, and you can always reach out by scheduling a call through that webpage.